This week on Quality Digest Live, we talk about coming back from the brink of destruction. When partnerships fail, what do you do? Well, we'll find out in 30 seconds. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest. Many businesses, probably most businesses, are some sort of partnership between maybe family or family and friends, or maybe just a partnership of friends. Some of these friends come together and, I don't know, maybe start a microbrewery, or a brother and sister start a bakery. You get the idea. But very often, because these partnerships are with people we care about, the strains inherent in any business can have a catastrophic effect. So how do you put back the pieces to a partnership and create a successful partnership and friendship and keep the business running? Well, joining us today is frequent guest Kelly Graves, CEO of Internal Business Solutions and author of the book, The Management and Employee Development Review. Hi, Kelly. Welcome back once again.
Nice to see you, Dirk. Nice to be back.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, this is kind of sad. I mean, really. I mean, and we see it a lot. And you know, I say probably most businesses. I mean, something like 90% of or 95% of the businesses in the United States are small mom and pop shops, right? And literally, sometimes it is mom and pop, you know, or it's friends. You know, a bunch of friends have a great idea for a product, or they, you know, whatever, and they come together and they start a business. But I think, and I'm sure you'll touch on this, because they're friends, and you have this friendship, and you have this camaraderie, and now all of a sudden you're in a position that, well, somebody's got to be making decisions. Somebody's got to be telling the other person what to do, and all of a sudden, these kind of equal footing that you have as a family member or a friend, that changes when you're in a business, and then the business starts going through strains, as any business does. You know, has its ups and downs, and now those dynamics sometimes don't work really well in a business, and that's where the real problems come in. Have I pretty much summed up what the issue is?
Yeah, and it can happen whether it's a small mom and pop business or medium-sized businesses where there's maybe 100 or 200 employees, all the way up to large corporations. You still have those dynamics at play. As you know, I'm not a big person on top 10 lists, so I'll tell a story related to this. I was working with a company about, I guess it was 9 or 10 years ago, and this is an engineering firm, and they had one side of the firm was ran by one partner, and it was classic engineering, and they had around 25 engineers and then the support staff to go along with that. On the other side of the firm, they had a manufacturing and sales part where they just manufactured and sold their products. And so when they got a hold of me, they had talked with 2 other people before they interviewed me. And I think it's important to hear this, is the first person that they talked with was an attorney. And when they went and talked, you know, they'd been together for about 15 years, and you know, they just continued to have problems. So they said, okay, let's go talk to an attorney. And the attorney said, I don't really know if I can help you with your relationship. I can help you dissolve the company and do it in a legal fashion. And they'd probably thought that, but they weren't really to that stage yet. And so the next person that they interviewed was a coach, an executive coach. And he assured them that, you know, I can probably help you with your relationship, not real sure. And so he seemed, you know, really good at what he did. When they talked with me, I said, well, you know, I think I can help you with your relationship, but that's only one problem. You actually have 2 problems. One, the relationship each of you have is problem number 1. Number 2, in 99% of the situations I've gone into that are similar to this, your staff has a problem with each other as well. Typically, when managers don't like each other, the people within those 2 departments don't like each other also. Whether it's said overtly or covertly, it just happens that way.
We're on his team and we're on her team, and they're at each other's throats. So
there's definitely a them and an us.
Okay.
And so I said, so we have to approach this systemically. If we just work with you guys, the team is still going to impact your system. And they it made sense to them, so they ended up hiring me. So the first thing we did is I had to talk with them about, one, being honest. And in any relationship, it comes down to honesty, trust, and communication. And so what we needed to do was talk about I'll talk about manager or partner number one, partner number two. Partner number two ran the sales and manufacturing portion, and he made a lot of mistakes. And that's the tougher part of the organization. The engineering firm is pretty straightforward. It's a lot more block and tackle, where the sales can be up and down, manufacturing can be up and down, and so that was the problem. And so in helping partner number one, the engineer, understand why partner number two made the decisions that he did. Hindsight's 20/20.
Sure.
We can always say, oh, I would have done this, but given time and resources, sometimes maybe you wouldn't. So helping partner number one understand why partner number two made the choices that he did had a lot to do with helping them bridge the gap. Two was having partner number two metaphorically raise his hand and say, I made some mistakes. I wished I would have done this different. So that's another big factor in bringing any partnership together, is each person needs to look in the mirror and honestly say, I've made mistakes here. If you don't have that, it's time to just cut. Each person needs to admit their strengths and their weaknesses. And so having them start talking about the relationship, having them talk about their interaction, how they interacted, some stuff that was facts that messed up the relationship, and then other things, what they made up that messed up the relationship. We all make stuff up, right?
Right.
We think a person is mad at us because of X, and when we really dissect all that, usually it's not as many problems as we thought. We just made them up. Right. So having them talk about this, and so that helped a lot, and that took about 4, maybe 5 sessions to get through that piece of it and get them kind of stabilized. We still had work to do, but get them stabilized where it was time to start bringing in the management team. The key here is having the two partners be secure enough in their relationship and secure enough in who they were to be able to admit to their management team, this is where we made our mistakes. These are the steps that we took to start repairing our relationship and put the company back on solid footing. We wanted to do this, or I wanted them to do that, so that they could model what we wanted the management team to start doing.
Right.
Okay. And so each manager, we went around the table, and this took about 6 sessions to really start making some progress, because people, one, it wasn't a huge team, but it was a large enough team, maybe 8 or 10 managers, each representing each part of the firm, talking about stuff that they'd made up, problems that they had, and me kind of helping them dissect that and come to terms with it and encouraging relationship building. And we were able to make some significant growth with the organization and really put all the pieces back together of that organization. The third factor that came into play is partner number two, who ran the manufacturing side. He had bouts of depression. And because of the depression, when he was having a bout of depression, his decision making was poorer.
Sure, yeah.
And then when his decision making was poorer, then that caused the depression to even falter more.
Yeah,
so
exactly,
it was and so we didn't fill in the management team on that, but the other partner definitely knew about that, and we talked about that openly between the three of us. And we were able to start really putting the pieces back. And so working with partner number two with his depression, and also in helping him make better decisions, and really getting both of them working as a team again, because they'd gotten to the point where I don't even want to talk to you, I don't want to have lunch with you, I don't want to see you, because each time we do, we fight. So really putting back the pieces made a big difference in repairing that organization.
Is this more difficult? I mean, I'm sure this kind of situation exists in all organizations that have this kind of problem, but is it harder when those partners are, start off as friends or family? Is it more difficult to break through those barriers than if they were just, strictly business partners. Frank over here and Fred over there. Yeah, we both got a great idea. They're not necessarily friends, but it's a business relationship. Is it more difficult to deal with these issues when there are actually feelings involved?
Yeah, much more difficult. In fact, in the last probably 8 or 10 years, I've done a lot more with family corporations, where you have family members that are involved in the organization, and then those people who aren't directly involved, but they might be on the board.
On the board, right.
And so you have the family dynamics playing a whole role, and then that impacts the business relationship. So yeah, it gets a lot more involved and dicey.
Well, how do you approach that? I mean, do you become more of do you almost change hats, become almost a personal counselor as well as a business counselor?
Yeah, I really go into wearing a therapist hat, an individual therapist hat, a group therapist, family therapist hat, and then the business function. And what I get across to people is the business has to come first. I don't care if it's been around for 50 years. We've all seen businesses that have been around for 50, 80, 100 years that not make it.
Yeah.
So the business has to come first, because most of the time people are getting income from this, and we really owe it to the grandfather or grandmother who started it, and then the third generation or fourth generation who are going to receive it. So we really have to put the business first. So sparsing all that apart and putting them in their little component areas, and it can be difficult. I like the challenges. I think it's kind of fun, but then I'm not emotionally involved, and that's the key. Getting back to your original question, when people aren't emotionally involved, it's much easier to say, I'm here because I hold a certain set of skills. You're here because you hold a certain set of skills. Let's put those together and make a business.
Yeah.
But the more business-like we can keep that and make sure that you're in your lane, I'm in my lane, the more effective we can be as a partnership.
Does it make sense in those situations that in terms of company function, that these friends or family members, that their functions don't overlap as much? I mean, does that make it easier, or does it even matter? I guess what I'm saying is, like, if husband is making one decision and it directly affects the wife's department, then I could see where there'd be more clashes, whereas the husband's way over here, there's not a whole other than it's the same company, there's not a whole lot of overlap in those functions. I'm just wondering if that plays into this at all, or not.
Yeah, it plays into a lot, and that's where we have to get down to. At home, we're husband and wife. At work, we're CEO and secretary or CFO, something like that. And getting them to understand this, helping coach each one separately and together. These are your functions, these are your functions, and doing our best teaching them how to leave our home life at home and put on our business hats at work. And obviously it's nearly impossible to do, but we try to improve it as much as we can. These kinds of things you don't fix 100%, but if you can improve it by 40, 50, maybe 60%, you've made significant gains.
Have you ever seen a situation where let's say it's a family operation, and in the middle of running the business there's a divorce, and yet they still stay, or there's some big family schism, and yet still the business, they somehow muddle through it and make it work even within the context of the business without allowing this major disruption on the outside work its way into the inside?
I've never had a divorce. I did have a situation where it was, we were moving into the third generation taking over the company. This was a decent sized company. They did about 125 million, and it was probably 250 employees. So a good sized organization. They had 9 different facilities, and the son was the CEO. He'd taken it over from the grandfather, and his son just assumed my dad was a CEO, which means I'm going to be the CEO. And he wasn't capable.
Okay.
He had tried to run different departments, and he just did not have the ability. And so I had to sit with him and his father and a couple other people to say. And the father had explained this to his son, but his son really hadn't heard it. So it was up to me to say, look, you need to understand that your family loves you, but you are not going to be the CEO, and you're never going to be the CEO. Not today, not in 10 years.
Right.
And so that's something that impacted the family as well as the business.
Okay.
And it was hard for him, just emotionally to take. He'd been telling everyone for years, I'm going to be the CEO. And everyone's kind of laughing behind his back. So that was a really tough one in terms of wanting to take care of someone and do the best you can, but knowing that they just weren't capable and they weren't coachable at that level, in that size of an organization. It's one thing if an organization is small, it's another thing when you've got a pretty complex organization. And as they get larger, they just get more complex. It turns into a corporation more of than a family business.
Okay, so we'll wrap up with this question.
Okay.
So if you're starting, let's say you're starting from the beginning, you just started a business, it's a family business, or it's a bunch of friends, whatever, there's those emotional attachments, whatever those are. What should you do from the beginning to make sure that this type of you're hurting my feelings, you're my best friend, how could you do this to me?
Right.
How can you kind of make sure that type of thing doesn't happen? How do you set this up?
The best way to do it is to find an objective person that has been down that road before, whether that's a consultant, a coach, a family member who's not involved and has been down this road before, because you want to take it as a business function. What are your roles? What are my roles? And then oddly enough, we want to figure out, if this doesn't happen, what is going to be the deciding factors that's telling us this isn't going to happen, and we've got to dissolve, and how are we going to do that? So you actually have to have all the pieces in place, not only to build and develop the company, but actually to dissolve the company if it doesn't work. And you need to approach it very business-like. Most friends and family members that get into business, oh, this is going to be fun, and it's a fantasy.
Right.
And it's just like any relationship. You have that fantasy 3 or 6 months, and then the real work hits and reality sets in. And that's where you have to really be honest with yourself on what you need from your partners and what you're bringing to the table, and what are their roles, what are your roles, and really have that spelled out on paper, and having someone, whether that's an attorney or again a consultant, to help you go through those. And that's going to help in a lot of ways.
It's interesting that you mentioned having the planned ahead of time for the dissolution of the company. That's interesting because you would think, well, let's just cross that bridge when it comes to. But I'm thinking, gee, in terms of the family or friendship, if you have a way out that's going to make that smooth, at least once you've made that, if it's not working and you say, okay, guys, this isn't working, let's dissolve the company, and that goes smoothly, I think that probably is going to help maintain those friendships or those family bonds after the company is dissolved, as opposed to it being a free-for-all at the very end, nobody knows what's going on, it becomes a slugfest, as opposed to having been planned out ahead of time. Look, we don't want this to happen, but if it does happen, here are the steps we go through to make it smooth so that we can all, we know what's expected of us ahead of time should we unfortunately go down that path.
Right. It's, having good plans and then sticking to those plans and then revisiting those plans quarterly.
Periodically, yep.
It's so important because, what we think we're going to build and where we are in 6 or 12 months might be something different. And, it's really hard with partnerships because your vision might be different than my vision. Even though we discuss it, it might be different 12 months down the road.
Right.
So, and that goes back to any relationship, whether it's in business or personal, trust and communication. You need to be talking about the difficult topics that we don't want to bring up. We need to bring them up because we will cross that bridge eventually.
Right. All right. Well, as usual, Kelly,
right.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Appreciate it. Kelly Graves, author of the Management and Employee Development Review, Competitive Advantage and Transformative Teamwork and Evolved Mindsets. We can just throw that up there on the screen real quick so people can get a quick peek at it. By the way, this book is available from CRC Press as well as Amazon, or you can just Google Kelly Graves and Management and or just Kelly Graves and management book, and I'm sure it'll just come up at the top of Google. You can go out there and check it out. So once again, Kelly, thanks for joining us, and thanks to all of you as well for joining us today. If there is a topic that you would like us to talk about, by the way, we keep bringing Kelly back on the show, so if there is a topic that you'd like Kelly to talk about, some HR or employee development or so forth, send that to us as well. Send any of your ideas to qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we'll get them on the show. So thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next week. So long.